Welcome to TCM. I'm here with my colleague, Professor Patrick Jagoda, and we have two nights of films that tell us about how games are such an important part of life. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks so much.
It's great to have you here and to be here in this space, the Weston Game Lab here at the University of Chicago. You're a game designer, you teach many facets of games. And I wonder first if you could tell us about what this space is and what happens here.
Yeah, so this is the Western Game Lab, which is part of the Media Arts Data and Design Center. Students come in here to play games, to analyze games, to design games, and we start with board games. So we move on to video games later, but we start with the analog, and we think about things like rules and objectives and numbers of players. What makes a game fun? What makes a game meaningful? And we have students coming in here from economics, from computer science, from cinema studies, from English, and so forth.
Amazing. You are a faculty member. In fact, you're the chair of the Cinema and Media Studies department. So we have this nice combination of thinking about film and games for two nights, thinking about games people play, films that have moments where folks are playing games. I would love to hear you talk about the kinds of things that you teach here at the university with regard to games.
Yeah, I teach a critical video game studies course where we, believe it or not, analyze video games, right? This is what I do for a living. I also teach game design courses. So we do an intro to game design course that focuses on board games, on tabletop storytelling games, even on kind of live action performed games, again, en route to video games. I also compare cinema and video games frequently.
Well, the films we're going to watch tonight feature games, sometimes in a very seemingly small way, sometimes in larger ways that have to do with the theme of the film. And we're going to start with a film called Our Vines Have Tender Grapes from 1945. It's a coming-of-age story. Margaret O'Brien plays a young girl. Agnes Moorehead and the great Edward G. Robinson are her parents. They're Norwegian immigrants living in a Wisconsin town. And we see the everyday life that they have. And at one point, they play a game of checkers. It's interesting to think about the ways that games can represent part of everyday life and family life.
Yeah, absolutely. Games are in the background of things, but we very often play them with our parents, with our siblings. Sometimes they're, competitive rivalries, but that have hopefully a healthy back end to them. But games like checkers, chess, Monopoly are parts of many people's lives growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us more about checkers. This is a very, very old game.
It is. The original version of this is about 5,000 years old. It goes back to the city-state of Ur, to ancient Egypt. The modern version of this is about 1,000 years old, but it's played on 8x8 grid. It's a strategic game, but it tends to be more accessible and more casual in a lot of ways. And one interesting thing about checkers is that it's been mathematically solved.
Really?
Yeah, so whatever position you're in the game, a computer can figure out how that game is going to turn out. And this is remarkable, given that there are 500 billion combinations of games for checkers.
That's incredible. Yeah. It doesn't make us any less nervous about computers. But the film we're about to watch, we see two human beings using their own native logic to play checkers. So we'll talk more about the role that checkers plays in that film when we come back. Thank you, Patrick.
I look forward to it.
Let's take a look. From 1945, here is Our Vines Have Tender Grapes. Back with me to discuss Our Vines Have Tender Grapes is my dear colleague, Professor Patrick Jagoda, here at the University of Chicago. So we're sitting here in the Weston Game Lab and thinking about the roles that games play in films. And there's a very charming scene in this film where we see Margaret O'Brien and her dad, Edward G. Robinson, playing a game of checkers. What do you make of the importance of that scene?
Yeah, it's such an interesting scene. It's short but critical to the film. So Selma, the younger girl, is playing against her father, and she's about to win, and he acknowledges that, but he misses a move that he could potentially make, and she points that out to him. And he basically makes the move, wins the game, she's disappointed. And so there's this lesson about not being too selfless. So he's trying to make her a little bit more selfish in this late World War II moment. But in general, I think games are such a tool of education, right? I mean, they're an early moment of cognitive development, of learning strategic thinking, of problem solving, and of social relations. And that's kind of what we get in that interaction.
Yeah. It also seems like a really charming way to mark her progression as a young woman. We see her playing a variety of different types of games. She accidentally kills a squirrel at the beginning of the film. It's kind of like at that moment, the play as a soldier goes too far. There are these boundaries that have to be sort of figured out through different types of gameplay. The roller skates and the lesson about selfishness there as well.
Yeah, the film starts with this moment of violence, this accidental killing of the squirrel. And Selma says right after that, I don't want to play anymore. And so we start on this sour note. But as the film goes on, we see this wonder and play through the eyes of this young girl. And by the end, we get to this game, which is competitive on the one hand, but is much safer than the kind of violence that is happening around these characters in the broader world.
Yeah. Do you think of checkers as a kind of military type game?
It's pretty abstract, but it starts to have those elements. Chess definitely develops the militaristic side of things even more. It's interesting with this film. It comes out in September of 1945, just a few days after Japan surrenders to the United States and World War II officially ends. And so, in some ways, it isn't a war film, it's a post-war film. And admittedly, the production is happening during the end of the war, but the US knows it's going to win basically at that point. And so you have this sense of calm, but the residue of violence that is still moving forward into this peacetime period. And
Yes.
games are an interesting metaphor for that in some ways, right? There is an underlying violence, but it's meant to be a friendly activity as well.
Yeah. One of the other interesting things to me about that scene is it shows the closeness of the relationship between father and daughter. And much of the film is about how he has such a tender feeling about her, doesn't discipline her as much as the mom kind of thinks that he should. That intimacy is very important through gameplay in this film.
Yeah, I mean, intimacy is such an important part of games. I mean, think about how often people play games as icebreakers at parties, for instance. And even if you're playing competitively against someone, you still have to agree on the rules. So you have 80% of what you're doing in common. I mean, there's a kind of shared contract or agreement there. And that's even more true with our families, right? Where winning and losing sometimes isn't as important as playing the game, though, sometimes it becomes very important, as with my family.
Oh, mine too, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Patrick Jagoda.
I'm very happy to be here.
Well, stay with us because coming up next, we have a film in which Goldie Hawn unsuccessfully interrupts a game of Scrabble.
Next on TCM, foul play. Then no name on the bullet. And later, the apartment. TCM is your home away from home tonight.